Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Gaming with me, Tony Mo, and we're here with another game discussion. Today we're going to be talking about ArcheAge and the MMO. Over the last couple weekends, I had the opportunity to finally play the ArcheAge beta. I didn't buy into it. I was actually finally set a beta invite. I was actually convinced at one point that Trine was never going to send out beta invites because they merely wanted people to pay into their free-to-play game, which I have a pretty serious issue with games that do that. I didn't like when Sony did that with the EverQuest and the Founders Packs for Landmark, and I really didn't like what Trine was doing now, especially considering that technically ArcheAge is a game that has already been released in Korea almost 2 years ago now, and it's merely being ported over to North America. Now I know that requires a lot of time and effort and money, but I didn't really see the point in forcing people to pay for the microtransactions as a means of participating in the alpha or the beta. If you want your game to be alpha or beta tested, and you, especially in MMO, you should try and get as many people in as possible, and creating a $150 paywall or a $100 paywall definitely isn't the best way to do that. So that was sort of my issue to start with the game. Now I had heard a lot of good things about ArcheAge, and I've seen a lot of really cool videos, and it showcased the fact that the game was indeed going to have a lot of really cool mechanics, such as, you know, being able to be a pirate and sailing and being a merchant and farmer, and those are cool things in games. And usually they're not fleshed out enough to the point where they're actually interesting mechanics on their own. Sometimes an MMO will have a small farming or crafting mechanic, but you can't actually make real money off it. You know, you can't actually make it like a profession. I mean, you can make money, but you can't make it a job. You know, you can't make it like maybe like it was in Star Wars Galaxies, where you could literally just be a bard and make money singing songs for people. You know, those are the kind of things that I like to see in MMOs. So people had told me how great ArcheAge was going to be. I had friends who had played in the alpha, and I was really excited to give it a whirl. So you can imagine how sad I was when I had to drudge through an entire weekend of the beta over 4 hours of just grinding away at normal, boring-ass quests. The whole entire time, I'm like, where's this wonderful game that everyone was telling me about? Why am I killing monsters in caves and chasing bandits across the open fields of this randomness? And why is this game flashing extremely odd cutscenes at me that are trying to tell me bits of the story that I already don't understand because apparently I missed something at some point? It all felt so disconnected. It all felt so chaotic and confusing and rushed and trivial, and I hated it. I absolutely hated it. But I pushed on, and I thought at one point it would get better. I even asked people, you know, when do I get to the point where I can just stop doing combat and supposedly do whatever I want in this game? And everyone said level 10 and level 12. Yeah, when I reached level 10, while I was greeted with a quest giver who was willing to tell me how to farm, there wasn't really much else the game was showing me at that point. I was still in the middle of nowhere, not really sure what landmarks were nearby, or where I actually was in the world, or the importance of my character or my progress in the story. In fact, I just felt like I was someone in this vast open emptiness. I was very confused, and a lot of people will probably argue with me and say you just didn't know what the hell you were doing, and that may be the case, but the fact is I've been playing video games and MMOs for a very long time, and this is the first time I've played a game and felt so lost and confused, especially considering the whole entire time doing all of this trivial questing, this generic BS MMO starting zone crap. I was just like, when can I get to the good stuff? Like, I thought, you know, I was supposed to spend all of my time trying to become a merchant or a sailor or a pirate. I knew that those things were already a time sink. People had told me I had to grind and grind and grind, but I was willing to grind at those things because the idea of being a pirate on the open seas was very appealing, and I thought that that was more than enough reward for a lot of time spent grinding away aimlessly. Instead, I find myself grinding away just to get some lousy loot and some experience that was taking me nowhere. That was my experience the first 4 hours with the ArcheAge beta, and it continued that way over the past weekend, and I basically call it quits at that point. Now, there are people who, again, will tell me, oh, you should have let me help you, or this point could have helped you, and you could have gotten to the fun part of the game. And I'm sure that I could have, and I'm sure that if I continued to play, I would eventually get to the point where I could be a merchant or a farmer, and everything would be fine and dandy. But the issue I want to talk about is why MMOs consistently feel they need to make the first, like, 16 hours of their game boring beyond belief. Why the MMO is still 100% convinced that the fun doesn't start till endgame. That myself, the player, I'm supposed to dedicate months and months of my time to get to the good stuff. It's an absurd thought process. It makes no sense to me. And as gamers, I don't know how we continue to let games like that exist. I mean, I guess it's because sometimes they do a good job of creating a world that you want to explore. For example, Guild Wars 2. I sunk a lot of time into Guild Wars 2. Why? Because I liked the world, I liked the characters, I liked the art design, and in fact, the combat in Guild Wars 2 was actually pretty fun. I really enjoyed it, despite there being a lack of overall skills for each of the characters. ArcheAge, terrible generic combat to me. Nothing about it struck me as unique, so that really wasn't going to bring anything up. And to be honest, as pretty as the game is running on CryEngine, I found it to be very rough. My computer couldn't run it for crap. I had to turn a lot of the settings down. That's more so my fault. But I didn't see the worlds as beautiful. I didn't see them as nice places. They just felt like a lot of shininess. So nothing else was really there to pull me in, to make me want to continue to play this game to get to the good stuff. The whole initial experience with ArcheAge was just 100% negative. And again, it has, of course, part to do with my personal preference. Someone might really enjoy it. But the other part of it is the fact that MMOs just see this as being an okay thing to do. Because as gamers, we accept it. We play the game anyways. We're fine with having to drudge through 16 hours of content to get to the good stuff. I really hate it. I don't like the mentality, and it's why less traditional MMO experiences like Elite Dangerous and Star Citizen, I want to see them rub off on RPG developers. I want to see them rub off on these people making these modern MMOs, and I want to see an RPG that happens to be multiplayer. You know, I want to see experiences like that. Why should we be stuck to this generic formula? It just doesn't make sense. It's not there's no progression happening in the MMO space, and I don't know why people are so set on this. I mean, ArcheAge, I guess, is a port of an old game, so I shouldn't have expected it to be anything grand, but it had a lot of promise, and it was disappointing when it was also hidden. And for me, I'm not willing to spend that amount of time. You know, there's people out there who complain about the cost of video games and, oh, you only get like 4 hours out of this game. Yet, a game like ArcheAge is actually asking me to probably spend 15 plus hours before I can even actually experience what I want to experience within the game. That's not something I'm interested in anymore. There's probably a lot of people out there who are loving ArcheAge to death. In fact, I know I've heard a lot of people say really positive things about it, but I also know a lot of people who've gotten very burnt out on it because there's just too much time spent grinding and not enough time doing what you want to do, having a good time. The other thing that's always gone hand in hand with MMOs is the idea of time sink, of forcing the player to spend a lot of time doing one particular thing, because at the end of the day, once they complete that thing, there will actually be nothing beyond that, apart from going on to spend more time doing other things. Now, that was the one thing that, like I said, for me, ArcheAge, I thought could be different. You know, I wouldn't mind spending all this time doing whatever I needed to do to build a ship, because the reward of sailing around on the open seas in my own ship was going to be a pretty great one. To me, that was worth the time sink, but I never managed to get there, so I can't really speak too much more on ArcheAge, but it got me thinking a lot about the MMO, and it was definitely a discussion that I wanted to bring up to see everybody's opinion on. I know my opinion on it, and I know a lot of people are going to be very frustrated that I didn't spend like 15 hours with ArcheAge, but to me, 4 hours, that's my limit. If I'm not having fun after 4 hours, I'll leave it to other people. Other people can come play ArcheAge and have a good time, because I'm done with it, to be honest. I've already had my share of time sinks. I played EVE Online for like a year, and I liked my time with it, but there are moments when I look back and I say, why did I have to waste so much time doing nothingness to enjoy, you know, like 2 or 3 hours of the game? And that's just where I see myself going if I continue to play ArcheAge, even as it becomes free to play. So the question I have to ask you guys is one that I've asked before, but I'm going to ask anyways. You know, what are your thoughts on the modern MMO experience? Are you more attracted to, you know, less traditional MMO experiences like Star Citizen and Elite Dangerous are planning to offer? Would you like to see more games trying to do what they're doing, of course, in a fantasy setting or an RPG setting? You know, take it out of the space sim, bring it down to the sword and shield combat aspect of things, bring it down to the fantasy world. So, you know, let's have a proper RPG that just so happens to have multiplayer online components where you can truly do and be whoever and what you want to be. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, guys. If you've been playing the ArcheAge beta, let me know what you think of it. Let me know what you enjoy about ArcheAge most, because like I said, there were some things that made me smile in the game. It definitely had some positives, so I want to hear from the people who have spent time with the beta what you enjoyed about it more than anything else. Let me know in the comment section below, and I'll see you in the next one.